Now that we're all present, I'll call the meeting to order. We'll have a roll call.
Mr. Fiddler.
Here.
Mr. Overland. Mr. Love.
Here.
Mr. Burridge.
Here.
Mr. Huckabee.
Here.
Mr. Alexander.
Here.
Mr. Burgess.
Here.
Mr.
Thank you
Regan.
for waiting on me, Mr. Chairman.
Before we start our announcements and presentation, I certainly want to recognize Joshua and Debbie Kirkendall. He's here with his mother. And will you guys stand up and let us give you a round of applause? You'll probably have to stand up again because we want to brag on you some more later. With him is Officer, now, Randy, I don't know if I can say your last name correctly. Choppa, okay. I was going to say it wrong then. And also Traffic Engineer James Montgomery. You guys recognizing the work of Joshua is a great thing, and we'll talk about that more a little later. Thank you guys both for being here. Also, I have some guests here today that came with me. They had other business at the Capitol at the State Department of Education. We have our superintendent and his team, Jay McAdams and Kayla Moore, Regina Carr, Kim Dale, Kobe Sherrill, and Miss Denise Lovell. They're sitting right back here. Y'all stand up so we can clap for you guys. They are doing good work in Atoka County, setting the example for others. Okay, we will turn to our regular agenda and move to the next item. Are you handling that? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Mr. Secretary. Today, ODOT wants to celebrate something that often goes unnoticed, and that's citizenship. Citizenship among our young people is so important. The idea of getting involved in government, in the affairs of government, is something that we all strive to get people engaged in. Joshua Kuykendall took that step when he wrote a letter identifying what he believed to be a problem on State Highway 74 just south of Waterloo and communicating with the drivers on how to access a right turn only. I drive that section of highway frequently, and I've seen the kind of confusion that the drivers experience. I don't necessarily do it because I drive it all the time, but I've seen others that are not locals who have misunderstood the right turn only. Joshua wrote a letter to the Daily Oklahoman, which was given to us, and then it was provided to Division 4, wherein James, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing all of the people involved, where James took that information and made some improvements at that intersection. If I could, I would like to ask Josh to come forward, and as he's coming forward, Josh, could you join me? Josh is a 16-year-old sophomore at Deer Creek High School. He's working on his Eagle with the Boy Scouts, and this was a merit badge requirement that he needed to find citizenship and work on it, and he did that. Before, I know Josh has a couple of words that he wanted to share with the commission and everybody that's here, but before we do that, if Terry, would you let me have that good stuff right there? Okay. Josh, we want to present you with this certificate, if I could, and it's got a picture of the improvements that we made at your recommendation. If I could read this. Good Citizen Honor presented to Joshua Kuykendall on the 9th of November 2015. In recognition of outstanding community involvement, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation congratulates Joshua Kuykendall of Deer Creek for his commitment to serve and protect his community by highlighting a safety issue on State Highway 74 at Waterloo Road in Oklahoma County. ODOT honors him for his good citizenship and service to his community. Signed, Mike Patterson. Joshua, congratulations. We also, a few years ago, not too many years ago, in 2011, celebrated our 100th anniversary, and we wanted you to have this book. It has the history of the Highway Department, now known as the Department of Transportation. And I know you had a few words that you wanted to share, and then we're going to take a couple of pictures. Okay? And we're going to ask your Scoutmaster to come up along with your mother. So if you want to say a few words.
Okay, thank you. I am glad to be here. Thank you for making our roads safe. Many parents told me they're happy the highway is safer for my friends. Thank you, then for all do for Oklahoma.
Also want to add that Josh is working on a couple other merit badges. One is aviation, that's flying airplanes, and you guys know I love flying airplanes. And also golf, which I know nothing about, but most everybody else in the room does. So if we could have Debbie and Randy come up and join us, and James, could you join us as well? And we'll get us a picture with the commissioners and the secretary and everybody involved.
Joshua, thank you again. We'll move to item 154. It's the approval of the minutes of the Special Transportation Committee Commission meeting on October the 12th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion? Have a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Mr. Fiddler.
Aye.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Burridge.
Yes.
Mr. Huckabee.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander. Mr. Burgess.
All right.
Motion passes. We'll move to the consent docket, which consists of items 155 through 159. If there's a particular item that a commissioner would like to pull out and discuss separately, we will by unanimous consent. Otherwise, I present those items to you for a motion.
I make a motion.
We have a motion.
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion?
I just wanted to point out or be clarified on, you can see in 155, the preponderance of all the rail crossings are happening in Tulsa County. And as I understand it, ODOT kind of gets fed by the railroad. In other words, we can't move until we get detail back from the particular railroad on what we need in order to design what we need to design. So presumably, as we go forward, this will kind of be right-sizing itself as far as where the, where all these monies are going to be spent. Is that correct? Okay.
Any other comments? Hearing none, call the roll.
Mr. Fiddler.
Aye.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Burridge.
Yes.
Mr. Huckabee.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Burgess.
Aye.
Motion passes. We'll move to item 160, the engineering contracts. Mr. Tiegler.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, other members of the commission. Our 160 agenda item is, I have 5 parts this morning, parts A through E. Part A is Choctaw County Commission District 2. We have selected MacArthur Associate Consultants to prepare construction plans for US 271 over the Kiamichi Railroad and the county road. Total not to exceed amount is $561,300. Part B in Kiowa County, Commission District 5. We have selected EST to provide engineering for State Highway 115 over 2 unnamed creeks for a not to exceed amount of $288,500. Part C in Creek County, Commission District 8. We have selected CEC Corporation to provide engineering for State Highway 66 for a total not to exceed amount of $795,890. Part D in Ottawa County, Commission District 8, we have selected Craig and Keith Line to provide engineering for plans for US 59. Total not to exceed amount $786,175.88. Part E, Pawnee County and Commission District 8 also, we've selected Leidos Engineering to prepare engineering and construction plans for US 64. Total not to exceed amount of $715,070. All of these contracts are in our 8-year construction work program. Commission approval is recommended, and I'll try to answer any questions that you may have.
You've heard Mr. Tiegler's presentation. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Aye.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Burridge.
Yes.
Mr. Huckabee.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander. Mr. Burgess.
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Tiegler, continue with the engineering contract supplements.
Item 161, I have 4 parts this month. Part A is a statewide all districts on-demand engineering services. I want to clarify, please, that this is actually supplement number 2, not supplement number 1. Supplement number 1 was for a key personnel change, so we just missed that, and I apologize for that. This contract is with Garver to provide us engineering services upon demand, and this is a supplement not to exceed of $250,000. Part B in Stevens County, District 7, we've selected EST, and we have them working on engineering plans and final construction plans along the Duncan Bypass. Supplement not to exceed amount is $452,500. Part C in Delaware County, Commission District 8, we have selected Poe and Associates to prepare final design plans for State Highway 85 over Duck Creek. Total not to exceed is $399,000. And Part D, Washington County, also in Commission District 8, we have previously selected Poe and Associates to prepare final design plans for State Highway 11. Supplement not to exceed $344,715. Parts B, C, and D are projects that are in our 8-year construction work plan, and commission approval is recommended, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
You've heard the presentation. What's your pleasure?
Motion to approve item 161.
We have a motion for approval.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Mr. Fiddler.
Aye.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Burridge.
Yes.
Mr. Huckabee.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander. Mr. Burgess.
Aye.
Motion passes. We'll move to item 162, the lettings. Mr. Atkins.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, members of the Commission, item 162 consists of the final January, the tentative February, and the tentative March 2016 bid openings, and the Department recommends approval of item 162.
You've previously been presented the information for the lettings. You've heard the presentation. Do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
Have a motion?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Mr. Fiddler.
Aye.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Burridge.
Yes.
Mr. Huckabee.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Burgess.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Mr. Raymond, would you come up and talk about change orders?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, members of the commission. I'd like to present item 163, parts A through double C. These represent the change orders on projects with a cumulative total of $50,000 or less. This item is presented for your information only. No action is necessary, but I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Does the commission have any question on the items less than 50,000?
On number A, 163, could you not just get them to throw in the 2 cents?
I'm sure that we could. We'll work on that.
He comes late. If there are no more questions, we'll go to the change orders over 50,000.
Thank you. Item number 164 has parts A through double F. These represent the change orders on projects with a cumulative total greater than $50,000, and your approval is recommended.
You've been supplied that information also. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve item 164.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Mr. Fiddler.
Aye.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Burridge.
Yes.
Mr. Huckabee.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Burgess.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Mr. Dels, you can come up for the awards, even though you've got that tie on.
It's a great day to be a Cowboy.
I notice there's several orange ties in here. I guess it's only appropriate.
It's just love in the room, Commissioner. That's all it is. Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Secretary. First of all, my apologies to Director Mike Patterson. I've been told by the media people when I'm up here I have to move this thing down. So you'll have to adjust it when you come back. I apologize, but I'm just doing as I'm told. Item 165 are our recommendations from the October bid opening. It is recommended that the following items from the letting referred to by call order be awarded. That's call order 20, 60, 70, 80, 105, 110, 120, 130, 160, 170, 175, 180, 200, 210, 225, 230, and 240. This concludes the recommendations for award, and your approval is requested.
You've heard his recommendation. Do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
We have a motion for approval.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Aye.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Burridge.
Yes.
Mr. Huckabee.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander. Mr. Burgess.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
We'll hear the director's report by Director Patterson. Get the mic at the right
Yeah, I gotta
level.
get the Delts adjustment
The
done.
Del's adjustment. That sounds
That's what it
good.
will be referred to from now on. He's always wanting to be noticed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mr. Secretary. Got 3 things I want to visit with you about this morning. First of all, and Mr. Secretary, please jump in because it's something that we've been working on together, and that's federal legislation. Last week, the House of Congress passed their version of the transportation bill, the highway bill, and it is a piece of legislation that is 6 years long. Just like the Senate version, it has almost enough funding to do 6 years, but not quite. It has more like 5 years after they added some additional money toward the in a late hour amendment. So as that moves forward and they go into conference between the two, we may end up seeing a 5-year bill rather than a 6-year bill, but hopefully then it will be fully funded. We are looking for a long-term solution. As you know, we've gone through a series of continuing resolutions and extensions. We're currently in an extension that expires November 20th. Hopefully they can get something consummated through their process by that time, but if they don't, they'll do another extension, hopefully another short-term extension, because the idea is to keep the heat on, the need to complete the long-term solution. We haven't had a long-term solution since 2005. That was the last one that was passed, and it expired, I believe, in 2010, if my memory serves me right. And then MAP 21 was passed. It was an 18-month, I'll call it a solution, and it expired 2 years ago. So we've been just continuing on, not knowing exactly what's occurring at the federal level. All the while, we as an agency and you as a commission work on and approve an 8-year plan that looks 8 years ahead on what our federal funding will be. And somehow we're able to do that pretty well. And hopefully the estimates that we've given you in our most recent 8-year plan will hold true as they pass this long-term legislation. Mr. Secretary, anything you would add to that?
Right on target,
okay.
Mr. Director. Mike has done a great job up there working with both houses of Congress and certainly all our delegation for sure. He's kept them well briefed and made suggestions, and it's pretty proud of the work that the department has done up there in Congress. Thank you.
Well, it's a team effort. You've been standing next to me, and I've been standing next to you, and Mr. Gatz has been emailing constantly between the staff and the staffs of the chairman on both sides, Chairman Schuster and Chairman Inhofe. And we really appreciate the opportunity they've given us to provide input to what the legislation looks like. So more to come. Hopefully by this time next month we'll have something in place. I see Harold Smart standing over there next to the window, and you recall when I was here in the last commission meeting, I stood up and the last thing I talked about was the soccer championship. Well, the general manager's standing over there, and I hope he's smiling, he is, because that will tell you that the team, in fact, won the championship that evening, and we had a great crowd out there. Even as it was getting dark and they were kicking the ball around and doing what ODOT does, and that's be winners. And to Harold and everybody involved in the soccer program, congratulations. You guys did a great job. Again, they kept asking me if I was going to play, and I kept, grabbing my hamstring on the right side, saying, I can't go. I just got run over if I'd have got out there. The last thing I want to talk about is something that went into effect November 1st, and that's the new texting ban here in Oklahoma. That's a huge deal for ODOT. We have, over the years, we've lost 59 employees and countless other contractor employees who have worked alongside the road. I don't know how many of those were victims of distracted driving or even possibly texting and driving. But it's something that we have been keenly aware of and keenly sensitive to throughout this whole discussion about texting and driving and a possible ban on that activity. There's not a single maintenance worker in this organization that would not be reluctant to share a close call that they've had while working alongside the speeding traffic of the highways. And anything that the legislature and the governor can do to provide that additional safety to our workers is much appreciated. That additional safety to the traveling public is much appreciated. One of the things we often talk about are the 3 E's in highways, and that's engineering, education, and enforcement. The guys behind me do a great job in engineering this highway program, and these highway projects, and put good designs on the ground. And then it's up to all of us to educate ourselves on how to drive, how fast to drive, where to drive. But then we have to have the enforcement. And now we have another opportunity to enforce what's becoming an epidemic among our drivers, and that's texting and driving. So in closing, I just want to, again, offer my appreciation to the legislature and the governor, to the Highway Patrol and other law enforcement agencies that will be enforcing this new law. And don't let anyone ever forget, if you drive, you text, you pay in Oklahoma. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Director.
Any questions, Mr. Chairman?
Does anyone on the commission have a question for the director?
What legislator authored that bill? The no text bill.
That was Representative O'Donnell and Senator Yin.
Donald and who?
O'Donnell from the Tulsa area and Senator Yin from here in Oklahoma City. I believe he's your senator.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I think you handled it.
Thank you.
Secretary Ridley, I'll recognize you for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, a lot of times people will take credit for things that they really didn't have anything to do with. You know, I've certainly done that in my career, time or two. But sometimes you have people that you work with and maybe work for that have a lot to do with what goes on and a lot of the successes of the agency, and doesn't take any credit at all. And we had such a cabinet secretary prior to me becoming secretary, and that was Secretary Phil Tomlinson. Secretary Tomlinson, his office joined mine up there on the 3rd floor, and him and I would have long conversations at night, and sometimes a lot longer than I cared to have. He was an evening person, I was a morning person, and it didn't shake out too well. I was always agreeable just to get out of there at times. But during his tenure, he was the one that encouraged then Governor Henry to stay focused with the 8-year construction work plan. It was in its infancy when he came on board as governor and when he became cabinet secretary. He understood the importance of keeping the politics out of what we do. He also was one that when the legislation was passed that Director Patterson and I worked on in 05 and 06 that changed the funding level for the department, he was the one that helped convince the governor and his staff that this was a good thing and we need to be supportive of it. He was certainly able to get a lot of things accomplished that a lot of us never paid a lot of attention to because he never took credit for any of it. Well, right now, Secretary Tomlinson is in a battle for his life, and he has cancer and is really having a tough time. So, for those of you that know him, that worked with him, that were around him, if you could pause for a moment of prayer sometime during the day and think of him in his struggles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm sure a lot of you guys have memories of the secretary when he was here. Appreciate your comments. Before we adjourn, I'd like to make a few comments, Mr. Secretary. You know, some of us worry that you may get weary and tired sometimes. And we don't want you to,
Did I doze off a minute ago?
no, weary and tired of us. But I'd just like to recognize the work that you've done on the Drive Act and the assistance that you gave the senator in providing testimony and information, as well as others in the department. But your long-term view of transportation, both nationally and on a statewide and local basis, has meant so much to our state. And, we see further evidence of that in the announcement of the Turnpike package that you're leading as Secretary of Transportation. And just want to thank you for that leadership, for that vision. It takes a lot of experience to know what and when and how, and you have all of that, and you figured it out. One thing I did want to mention is, ODOT is involved in the Turnpike goings-on from the standpoint of coordinating our efforts. And your leadership there has meant so much to the department. And a lot of people don't recognize the fact that when we build a turnpike, that the Department of Transportation gets to use that expenditure as soft match for our federal funds. And that will ensure that we'll never not be able to fund a project when there are funds available on the federal level. And that's a big, big advantage in this state that other states don't have. And sometimes the public and others overlook that, but that is a major leg up for us. I'm excited about it, and as the chair, I want to applaud your efforts on the Drive Act and the $900 million Turnpike package that you've introduced. That is the governor's initiative. Thank you very much. Without anything further, we'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Fiddler.
Aye.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Burridge.
Yes.
Mr. Huckabee.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Burgess.
We're adjourned.